Alright, we're looking at an EA82 motor here, the back side of it. This is what we know as a flex plate, which is what ties into the torque converter on your automatic transmission. What we're going to do is we're going to pull this off and put a flywheel on here and install a clutch. Having this part is a good opportune time to take care of the rear engine seal, and if this is a turbo engine, you have a breather plate back here. You can change that as well. A lot of times those crack and then you get odd oil leaks, not knowing where the hell they're coming from. But with the rear seals on these, a lot of times the rear seals never fail, and you're almost better off leaving it be than trying to change it. This car has 105,000 miles, so I'd say we leave this seal alone and worry about it the next time the clutch is due at 200 and some thousand miles. First, we're going to take off the plate bolts. These bolts are actually shorter than a flywheel's bolts, so when you're swapping from a torque converter to a flywheel, you do need the appropriate bolts that come from the flywheel onto here. So typically with the automatic transmission flex plate, we can shove a pry bar through the timing window through here like this to hold the whole deal in place if you need to. If it were a flywheel, you can take a wrench, butt it up against here, and thread in a bolt to one of the pressure plate holes to hold it still. We're just going to zip it out with an impact wrench because it makes a lot more sense and it's a lot easier to do. There you are. There's the back side of the engine. This here is our engine seal, right around here. Looks good to me. There's absolutely no signs of leakage at all. Here this flywheel has a little bit of glazing going on with it. If you can see too well with my fluorescent light here. But anytime you have the chance, you can, if you feel like paying a machine shop, you can have the shit turned down. A lot of times I'll just hit it up with some sandpaper just to kind of take the glaze off of it. Somewhere, you know, along the lines of 100 grit, 120 grit. If you have a rotary sanding cup that fits on the end of a drill with the sanding pad, that's the ideal way to go because you can get in there and knock all that clutch dust out of there. It's mainly more important you have a good strong pressure plate and clutch disc than the flywheel having been turned down. It really only needs to be turned down if it's so glazed that it has minuscule cracks in it, which this has a little bit of heat scoring, but I mean obviously you have friction there, so I would consider that normal and go ahead and use this thing as it is. Again, you want to work in like a circular motion, like using a non-directional finish, the same as you would for you know, scuffing down brake rotors after having turned them. This does the trick for the flywheel right here. All right, this is our new clutch set from Napa. Complete set with a pressure plate, disc itself, alignment tool there in the corner if you can see it, and a pilot bearing and throwout bearing. Now this is the pilot bearing here. The one on this flywheel is pretty shot. Kind of it should be a little tighter. It should be like loose spinning like that because that just means there's no lubrication and it's worn out beyond its tolerances. Should have a little bit of rolling resistance and roll smoothly. Alright, we have reversed our flywheel and we're going to knock out the pilot bearing from the back side of the flywheel just by simply knocking it out with a hammer and a roughly equivalently sized socket. Here we have a 7/8. Alright, she's popped through. Now let's put the flywheel back on its correct side and we'll be ready to insert our new bearing. Alright, a lot of people are going to object to this method of installing a bearing, but if you're careful and you manage just to hit along the outer race and not to hit within the sealed portion of the bearing, that'll do her. Right, now that we ready to put our flywheel on, if you make note of the flywheel bolt pattern, that two of these holes are going to be spaced differently than the rest of them. I believe that's right here. So that flywheel is only going to fit one way, and the reason being is because there's timing marks on the flywheel. The flywheel is going to fit against the back of the engine You can just basically stick it on there and then turn it around to make sure you have the bolt holes lined up. What I like to do is make sure I can get all of the bolts threaded in before I turn down any one of them. Otherwise you're going to get 7 of them in there and then the 8th one's not going to fit. Now we are using the longer bolts that are original to the flywheel here from our 89 GL 5-speed that it was parted from. Now if you need torque on the flywheel, the thing I was mentioning earlier is you butt up a wrench. I've used this trick many times. Usually there's a flywheel lock that kind of fits into the starter teeth to lock the thing in, but what I'll do is I'll take a wrench like so, roughly about a 1/2 inch size, 12 millimeters will have you, and butt the one end against the stud, and then thread the other one through a pressure plate hole to lock the flywheel in. Now the direction I have the wrench going this time would be turning to the left if you were loosening bolts. Otherwise, if you're tightening bolts, you want to install them on the other side. And this is a good method if you wish to torque your flywheel bolts down with a torque wrench. I just use the impact tool. I don't go cramming them on too hard, but it is important if you're going to go that method that you do a radial pattern as you would tightening down lug nuts on a tire. Alright, we have a flywheel here on our Subaru EA82 engine, and we are going to be installing a clutch disc. As you can see, now this clutch plate is going to go on here, lining up with these dowel pins. Some clutches you will have weights on them, and there will be a heavy side that will correlate with the mark on the flywheel. I believe with this one it's the alignment of the pins that determine that. Alright. It's on there, it's not seated in all the way. I'm just going to stick it on there enough to thread the bolts. And then once we stick the alignment tool in there and torque our bolts down, that'll seat it onto the dowel pins the rest of the way. Here's our alignment tool. It is designed to fit into the pilot shaft. And then this spline part fits into the clutch disc itself. Depending on if you have a front wheel drive or 4-wheel drive or EJ, you're going to have the right clutch tool for the right spline count. But you want that to wiggle in there like that so we can tighten it down. This is so it'll allow it to slide onto the transmission. Otherwise, if you don't do that, it's just not going to fit. And if you didn't have a clutch alignment tool, the only way around that is to leave these loose, bolt up your motor to your bell housing, and then come in from behind through the starter and torque these up one by one as you rotate it around, doing every other one first. So we are at the point where we can go ahead and torque these up. Now with those bolts, you're going to want to snug them all first just to seat everything and then torque them up. You know, torque them snug in about a 1/4 turn, or just enough to flatten out the cone washers. Now when torquing your flywheel pressure plate, you're going to want to work in kind of a radial pattern as if you were tightening down lug nuts on a wheel. There's a general rule for torquing down anything with more than one bolt that holds it down. Just kind of go in a radial pattern, working from the inside out or from the middle to the edge. I can't think of what the torque specs are, but basically once they're snug, just get them all snug here. Usually within a 1/4 turn. Usually with a smaller bolt, you're better off to have a smaller drive tool to get a better feel. So if you're doing the water pump or the oil pump, I recommend using a 1/4 inch drive ratchet or a stubby ratchet so you don't accidentally torque too much. So basically, it's snug. About an 1/8 to a 1/4 turn is enough. You know, just about enough to make the flywheel turn. Really don't need a whole lot. It is possible to break these off, and I have broken them before and ran a car off-road with five out of the 6 bolts intact. If you've done this enough, you can get a good sense of feeling for it.